It was the middle of October when I moved into that apartment. You might think that the change in weather, the wind turning cold, the skies deepening into a shade of gray so thick it could swallow light, was enough to unsettle anyone. But it wasn't just the weather, it was the apartment itself. It was strange from the start. The landlord didn't speak much, barely gave me any sort of tour. "It's yours if you want it," he said in that clipped voice, turning the key and pushing me in without a second glance. I had never believed in superstitions or felt the energy of a place before, but as soon as I stepped over the threshold, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. It was like stepping into a space that had been abandoned for decades, even though I knew it had only been empty for a few weeks. The first night, the rain began. It wasn't a typical storm at first, just a light drizzle tapping on the window. I thought nothing of it. I had a book in hand and a warm cup of tea beside me. The apartment bathed in the soft glow of the lamp. The world outside seemed distant, but the longer I sat there, the more I felt the rain pressing in on me, like it was pushing against the glass, begging for attention. There was something wrong about the sound. It wasn't the usual rhythm. Raindrops. This time, the taps grew faster, sharper. It was like the storm had a pattern, a direction, something deliberate. At first, I tried to ignore it, but the tapping kept growing in intensity, almost as if it was trying to draw me closer. I could hear it clearly now, scratching, a scraping noise from somewhere just beyond the window. No longer was it the simple sound of rain. No, it was something else, something more wicked. I stood up, my body heavy with hesitation. The apartment seemed colder than before. I rubbed my arms as I moved toward the window, as if trying to ward off the chill that had settled deep within my bones. The rain splattered against the glass, but there was no breeze, no wind. The trees outside stood completely still, as if frozen in time. I reached for the window and froze. My reflection stared back at me, still as it should be. But in that reflection, there was something more, a faint figure, a shadow behind me. I turned quickly, breath catching in my throat. But there was nothing there. I was alone. I stared back at the window. The figure in the reflection was gone, but my heart kept pounding in my chest. I didn't understand what I was feeling. Was it fear, curiosity, or something deeper? I tried to shrug it off, but the atmosphere in the room had thickened. My mind felt clouded, the air heavy, as if something was waiting. By midnight, the storm had grown fiercer. The wind was howling, the rain pelting the windows with an aggressive intensity. I kept shaking the window, half expecting to see someone standing just outside in the torrential downpour. But there was never anything. Then the tapping returned. Tap, tap, tap. This time, the sound was louder, more insistent. I moved closer to the window, my feet dragging across the floor. When I reached the glass, I saw it. It was brief, just a flicker, but it was there, a figure just beyond the rain, standing motionless. I blinked. It was gone. I stepped back, shaking my head. It was just the storm, just my eyes playing tricks. The wind, the rain, the shadows, they could all distort the light, but I knew what I had seen. It had been there. I tried to move away to distract myself. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend, but no response. The storm was loud, too loud. I didn't want to be alone with it, alone with whatever it was that was outside my window, watching. As the night wore on, I began to hear more than just the storm. There was something else now, a whisper, a soft, barely audible voice that came from the direction of the window. Come closer. My heart stopped. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was in the room. I could hear it clearly in my head, not in my ears, but in my mind. It was a command, a plea. I froze. My eyes scanned the apartment, but there was nothing. I couldn't make sense of it. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run. But my body wouldn't move. It was as if the voice had paralyzed me, locking me in place. Another whisper. Come closer. I couldn't tell if it was the wind or something else, but it was real. It was happening. I slowly backed away from the window, feeling my heart race in my chest. But then, I heard something even worse. A scraping sound. It was on the wall, behind me. I whirled around, but the room was empty, the door was shut, the walls, just plain walls. The storm outside had grown so fierce that it seemed like the world was collapsing in on me. But it wasn't just the storm. It was the air. The pressure had changed. It was to still now, to quiet. And that scraping sound, it wasn't the rain anymore. It was a claw dragging against the wall. The room seemed to shift as the air grew colder. The walls felt like they were breathing, like the very house was alive, watching me. The silence that followed that scraping sound was worse than the storm outside. The pressure in the room was so heavy it felt as if I was trapped underwater. I could barely think. My mind raced through the possibilities, trying to justify what I was hearing, but nothing made sense. I couldn't keep standing there, rooted to the spot. I turned toward the door, convinced that I needed to leave, get out, run. My heart was pounding in my ears now, the sound deafening. As I reached for the door handle, I froze once more. The cold from behind me crept like icy fingers crawling down my spine. Something had changed in the room, a presence. I could feel it pressing in from every direction. There was a weight, a pressure like a looming shadow just out of view, pushing me deeper into the corner of the room. I tried to scream, but my voice felt muffled, as though something was suffocating it before it could escape my throat. Then I heard it again, the voice. Come closer this time. It wasn't just a whisper. It was a voice, a gravelly, low whisper that scratched against the edges of my mind, filling my head with an unbearable pressure. My legs refused to move, and I felt as if I was being drawn in, compelled to obey. My eyes locked on the window once more, as if the figure that had been there before was now reaching out to me through the glass. But there was no figure, no shadow, just the rain that now fell in a steady, rhythmic pattern. Tap, 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 but this time it was synchronized, each drop hitting the window in time with the pulse of my racing heartbeat. I moved closer to the window, my feet dragging like weights. My body felt stiff, as if I was moving through thick mud. There was something unnatural about this place, something that twisted the laws of nature and space. I reached for the window, my hand trembling as it hovered just inches away from the glass, and then I saw it, a reflection. It was not mine. It was a face twisted and contorted, eyes hollow black pits staring back at me. Its lips were stretched into a grotesque, silent scream. I staggered back, gasping for air, but the face didn't disappear. It stayed staring, the sound of rain, the tapping against the window had stopped. The world outside seemed to vanish. Only the face remained. Come closer, I could feel the voice crawling inside my skull now, as if it was burrowing its way into my thoughts. The voice was more insistent, more demanding. I was frozen, completely still. My heart felt as though it was going to explode in my chest, yet I couldn't move. Something tapped at the window, a soft, almost affectionate tap, and that was when I understood. It wasn't just trying to communicate with me, it was trying to pull me in. It wanted me. I snapped out of my trance-like state, desperate to escape. I turned and ran for the door, the tapping of the window still echoing in my ears. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't budge. I twisted the handle, but it was locked. I yanked at it, panic rising in my chest. I looked back at the window, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move behind the glass. The shadows outside were growing. They stretched in unnatural ways, slithering like liquid smoke. I could feel them, watching me, moving closer. The sound of the storm outside was deafening now, the wind howling and shrieking as if it were alive, desperate to get in. And then I heard it, the scraping again. It was closer now. The sound came from within the room. Something was scratching against the walls from the inside. It wasn't the wind anymore. It wasn't the rain. It was something else, something alive. and it was coming from behind the walls. I backed away from the door, trying to put some distance between myself and whatever was out there. I moved into the living room, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Every inch of air felt thick with dread. The apartment was closing in on me, and then it spoke. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a growl, a low, guttural sound that rattled my bones. "You belong to us now." The words struck me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my heart skipping a beat. The air seemed to crackle with energy. The apartment trembled, as if the very foundation was beginning to shake. I couldn't breathe. I could only hear that voice, the growl. It reverberated through the walls, through the very air. And then I saw a figure in the doorway, its outline barely visible against the darkness. Its movements were slow, deliberate. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that seemed to stretch too long. It took a step toward me, and the room seemed to darken even more. My legs felt as if they were made of stone, but I forced myself to move. I darted past the figure, my feet barely touching the ground, and I tried to make my way to the kitchen. The door was still locked. I tried the window, but it wouldn't budge either. I was trapped. I turned back toward the hallway, hearing the scrape again. The sound was now a slow, deliberate drag, like claws on tile. The figure had moved closer. It was following me. "You can't escape." The voice was clear now, not in my mind, but coming from the figure itself. It spoke with a voice that was both ancient and otherworldly, a sound that echoed through the room like thunder, shaking me to my core. The figure moved closer. Its face, you could even call it that, was a mass of dark shadows and distorted features. Its eyes were wide, black voids, and the mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. I felt my mind breaking, my grip on reality slipping away. I was alone, but I was never alone. The next few hours passed in a blur. I couldn't tell if time was moving at all. It felt like I was trapped in some kind of sickening loop. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing with a life of their own. The whispers never stopped. They came from everywhere, from the walls, ceiling, the floor. They crept into my head, seeping into every thought, every moment of clarity. "Come closer. You belong to us." The storm outside was deafening now. But the house, my apartment, was even worse. It had become its own entity, alive with something ancient, something malevolent. The rain was no longer just rain. It was part of it. The storm had created this thing, this presence. It had brought it here. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled into the kitchen, my hands shaking as I reached for the knife block. My body felt distant, as though it wasn't my own. I grabbed the sharpest blade I could find and held it in front of me, my knuckles white with fear. It didn't matter. The blade wouldn't save me. Nothing could save me. The lights flickered. The sound of the storm seemed to distort, becoming warped and twisted. It was all wrong. The world outside didn't make sense anymore. Then something cracked. The wall beside me split open, revealing a darkness so deep it swallowed the light. I screamed, but no sound came out. My body was frozen again, held captive by something far worse than fear. The blackness behind the wall shifted, writhed, and then the whisper stopped. And in the silence, there was only one thing left. A presence that filled the entire room. It was here. It was standing right in front of me. It was time to face it. I turned toward the door, but it was too late. The walls had closed in. The darkness had swallowed everything. There was nowhere to round up the thing, the entity, the force, whatever it was here, in the room with me. Its presence was like an iron weight on my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, but somehow I could feel its gaze on me, its hunger. "You are ours," it whispered, and then it moved. Not fast, not with the speed I expected, but slow, deliberate. Its long, twisted limbs reaching out for me, its hollow eyes locking onto mine. I had no choice. I was going to die here in this apartment. No one would ever know. No one would ever find me. The rain stopped. The storm was gone. I opened my eyes, but everything was still silent, as if the world had forgotten I was ever here. I tried to move, to breathe, but my body felt heavy, cold. And then I remembered. The figures, the storm, the whispers. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I never would be. The door creaked open once again, slowly. I turned around, and I saw a figure standing in the doorway. Its face was a blur, but its eyes hollow, empty, was watching, and I heard it again. That voice, "You're not leaving." Did you hear the whispers? Are you hearing them too? Let me know what you think in the comments. Stay tuned for more terrifying stories. The storm isn't over yet, and neither are the things that follow it. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any story. Thank you.